Hi, my name is Mike Dane. I'm the training director for MLS Technology. Today's class is going to be the Advanced Matrix and Realist class. I did want to double check to make sure who all has been to the Matrix or Realist classes before. If anything, we do want to ensure that everybody has been through those classes just to ensure that you've gotten through the basics, because this is actually meant to be exclusively for advanced usage. We are going to be covering a couple of the things that we have in the Matrix class with a little bit extra spin to them. But the purpose of today's class is actually that when technology is continuing to speed ahead, realtors are often going to be either in front of the curve or getting left behind. The public expects a level of technical expertise from realtors these days that's far greater than we've seen in the real estate industry in the past. So as new trends are surfacing in the real estate technology world, like we had Coming Soon that got added earlier this year, virtual staging was also recently added, just to name a few. The last thing that you guys need to be worried about is your proficiency regarding the basic tools that you guys use on an everyday basis to run your business. So the Matrix MLS system and the Realist tax system, although not new to any seasoned agent, contain some advanced tools that if not used could maybe be forgotten, or just without using them, it could bog down your daily routine as, usually simple tasks end up becoming frustrating and cumbersome. So this class is designed to teach new and seasoned realtors proficient ways to use your advanced tools within those systems that you use every day. So the first thing we wanted to cover was in Matrix. Now, using Matrix, there's a bunch of different ways for you guys to do searches. Obviously, we've got our search function here on the homepage that just does a search for an address. It does have some limitations to it. We also have each of our property types separated out into searches that you can complete. And there's also a cross-property search that allows you to search for all of the kinds of properties, whether it's residential, commercial, vacant, or leased. Now, I'm going to use this cross-property search for our example. There's a function that doesn't really get an awful lot of use. It's this house number, street direction, street name, street type. It's effectively just giving us an option to add in an address. Now, one of the cool things that you can do is actually add more than one at a time. So if you do have a client that contacts us and says, hey, I want to look at such and such property, and then maybe a little later look at another property. Well, you may not know the listing numbers for them, but as long as you've got the addresses from the client, you can put in up to 10 of them at the same time and do your search. So it makes it really easy if you have maybe somebody who's just given you a bunch of information, you have to dump it all into one place. You can just do your search for them all at once, and when you get to your results, it'll only show those properties. Now, we also have some of our search defaults. So when you first show up to a quick search, it's going to have the only default in there, which is the active checkbox. But let's say that you guys are always using a specific area, like for instance, especially with appraisers or realtors that usually only work in one area, like I've known a couple people that only work in McAllister or only work in Tahlequah. So instead of having to jump in here and every single time you're doing a search, you're always having to put in Tahlequah, or you're always having to put in Carter County. Instead of having to fill that information out manually every single time, any of the details that you put in here, you can go up to the top right corner. There's a little cogwheel and it says set or clear defaults. So I can click on that and set currently selected search criteria as my starting default. Now what that means is that it's going to be saving it for that specific property search that you're doing. So for instance, if you are searching for residential properties and you're only ever going to be searching within that specific area, so like we'll just say Ardmore. But then whenever you go to your vacant land search, you're actually searching for the whole county. You can set this as its default. So I'll set that. There we go. So when I'm on my residential search, it should remember that. I'm going to go to my vacant land search and we'll do Carter. Save that as my default. Now, if I go back to my residential search, slowly but surely, it remembers Ardmore. And similarly, when I get back to my vacant land search, it remembers Carter. So each of these is going to be done on a search by search basis. So whatever your property type is that you're looking for. Here we go, back to my quick residential search. And I can reset back to the system defaults if I need to just clear whatever I'm doing. All right. Now, we do also have the option to create custom searches. This is where those defaults that you're seeing might be a little bit more beneficial. Now, under each of the different property types, we do have an option to create your own. Now, the create your own option is going to allow you to collect all of the different fields that you're going to be using individually. Now, the catch with that is that you guys might have noticed on each of our quick versions of the searches, it already has a lot of these fields just filled in for us. Now, most of these are going to be fields that you'll be using at least once or twice during your time. But when it comes down to it, if we do a brand new search from scratch, so like let's say I go to vacant land and I do create your own, what it's providing me with is a completely blank search. That means that if I'm trying to find specific acreage or specific town, specific county, school district, whatever the case may be, I'm going to have to go down to the additional fields section here, click on add, and then find each of those fields that I was interested in and manually put those on there. Now, you can do this relatively easily. So like I'll select acres. I know that I want to do city as well. So I'll hold down control, click on city. We can see county as well. Land use, I think, is another one that gets used a lot. Ooh, lot dimensions, lot square footage. There we go. So I'll click on add. It puts in all of the ones that I have selected. You can also, there we go, current use. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, this search function at the bottom is really helpful. If you are curious as to what the current fields are called, you can always go to our property data form to find them. I'll show you guys how to do that in just a moment. So, but now that I have these 5 that are added, if there's one that I wanted to maybe move up or down on the list just to make sure that it's actually getting that prominent space at the top, I can do so. If I wanted to switch this up, so we've got county and city are right next to each other, and then we'll put lot size in front of it as well. Perfect. So when I go back, now I have a custom search that's made, and notice again, there's no pre-built fields up at the top. It'll only show me the information down here at the bottom. Now, there is one thing that, again, since the default, whenever you guys are getting into the quick searches, it's always going to have the active checked by default. You'll notice that is one of the glaring omissions on this is when I do my search for this, it's literally not going to look for any of the fields that aren't currently present on this field. So if I don't have status, if I don't have the bedrooms or bathrooms, or I forgot some other field that's really commonly used, it won't include that as a criteria for my search results, but that also means that if it's not on here, I can't select it either. So you can always go back, click on the add/remove. We see all of our information there. We'll do status. Excellent. And now I'm going to move that all the way back up to the top again. Perfect. Now I've got my status. Hey, that makes a little bit more sense. All right. Now, another search that we get relatively frequently is going to be whenever we're doing a residential search and we need to find out whether or not there's actually some kind of amenities that have been added to the property. Now, I would recommend that if you guys aren't familiar with where all of these fields are tied to on the listing data, that you go back to the property data form. And that's actually what I'll be using for my example right now. So when I'm on the MLS portal, so the very first page that you sign into when you go to mlstechnology.com, there's going to be forms and contracts. And under here, there's a section for MLS specific forms. Now, this is where you guys can find change forms and firm exclusives, but this is also where you guys can find the matrix data forms. They do have one for every property type, so residential, vacant, leasing, and commercial, just like we saw when we were searching in matrix. I'm going to click on the residential one. And let's say that we have somebody who's asking for gated access to their property. Now, when it comes to gated access, and this is an example we use in our matrix class, but the gated access is something that's going to be maintained by the HOA. So down here towards the bottom, we've got our HOA information. So if I were trying to find maybe if gated access was even something that listing data can contain, I can show up to my residential property data form. I'll just do a Control F. No matter which browser you guys are in, Control F should allow you to do a search, whether it's on a PDF or whether it's in a web page. But I'm going to do a search for gate. Here we go. So gated access is actually something that can be added to a listing, and I find that under my HOA amenities, under HOA information. So here's gated access, and if I go back to matrix and I want to do a search specifically for gated access, just like we did with our custom search where we were adding fields, I'm going to go down to additional fields, click add, and now we can just type in HOA. Here's HOA amenities. So notice again, the fields that we're seeing at the top of these headers. So like we've got percent interest, HOA mandatory, HOA fee, the schedule, amenities, all of those are going to be matching what the fields are searchable in matrix. So here we have HOA amenities, we click add. When we go back, now I've got, just like we have property subtype and city, school district, down at the bottom, we have an additional field that we've just added for HOA amenities. And we can just check gated access. And about 10% of our listings in the system right now, apparently. A little shy of that, but not bad. And these can be used in tandem as well. So underneath each of these, you guys notice how there is a or not option? This is going to allow us to say, all right, if I select multiple different items in here, it'll actually do a search for all of those items based on whether or not it's selected. So for instance, if I wanted to see if there was a golf course, I can click on golf course. We see that there's 40 matches. When I was on gated access, we had 324. If I select both of them at the same time, there may be some overlap, but you'll notice that my number increases. Looks like it increased to 29. So what that means is that it's actually searching for not only if it has gated access, but it's also going to be checking if it also might have golf course and includes both of those at the same time. Now, if I wanted to make sure that it includes both of those exclusively, meaning that it's not just looking for gated access and then also happens to look for golf course, if I click on add, what that means is that it's only going to be searching for specifically the properties that have both of those. So in this case, we can see 21 matches. So if we do a not option, what this does is it actually says, I don't want to see any listings in the system that include any of these information or any of these criteria. Now, that is kind of important when you guys are looking for something like, let's say you wanted to do, actually, let me clear this off here. There we go. Let's say that we wanted to do Tulsa City, but we did not want to be in Tulsa County. There we go. We click on not, and it'll show us just the properties that are in Tulsa City, but might actually be in Creek, or I think Rogers might also have some overlap with Tulsa City. So we only see those 20 matches. And again, that's the or, which is going to include all of the options, and which is going to limit it to just those options, and then not, which is going to say, I don't want any of that. So for instance, if we switch this over to Tulsa County, but not Tulsa, we got 552 matches. All right. Now, once we've got our search constructed, so I'm going to actually go back here, we'll check for gated access and then also golf course. There we go. We got 6 matches now. So I've constructed my search the way that I like it. I'm going to head to my results. And from my results, we actually have a whole bunch of different fields that are going to be showing by default. Now, I'm going to make sure that I'm on my system default. Yep. And I see that I've got the MLS number, the photos, the map. You know, remember the stuff from the basic MLS, matrix MLS class. We've got the link here that goes to a map of the property. Cool. But in my case, what I want to do is I actually want to start adding in some extra information. So I want to see how large each of these properties are. But in this case, it doesn't look like I see the acreage or the lot square footage. I can go into each of the listings. I can take a look at it and find out how large the lot actually is. Okay, it's a 1/4 acre, that's nice. I can move to the next listing by clicking next, next. I can return back to my complete list by clicking single line display. But that still means that I'm gonna have to go through each listing individually to find the acres. That's not what I wanna do. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna click on the blank space next to one of these column headers. Notice how my cursor turns into this 4-sided arrow. When I click there, it's actually going to give me the option to either remove this column or to insert this column. Now in my case, I'm actually gonna insert column, and I'm gonna do acres, which is right up here at the top, thankfully. Perfect. Click apply. Awesome. And if I would like them to be sorted by that, I just have to click on the column header. And now it'll actually be sorting by that. It looks like it's going smallest to largest. I'd like to reverse that, so I just click the arrow and that reverses it. Now we also have the option, if you guys would like, to insert a column. And let's say that we have a client like me, I'm not particularly fond of HOAs, but if I wanted to find out for sure from this page whether or not an HOA is mandatory, I can type in HOA, mandatory, and hit apply. And as we can see, since I included an HOA amenity as part of my search criteria, all of these are indicating to us that an HOA is mandatory. And if I wanted to get more information, even just from this screen, again, as long as I can click with the 4-sided arrow, I can do another insert column. I'll do HOA, we'll do fee, and I'm also going to hold down the control key and click fee schedule and hit apply. There we go. So now we can see we've got the, oh, that's supposed to say HOA fee, but that's okay. We've got our prices and how frequently they're actually going to be charged. Wow, that's a good one. This would be a little bit less of an imposition. These, on the other hand, but I guess if you're buying $1 million house, it wouldn't really be that much of a problem, would it? All right. Now, let's talk about what we've done with this customization. So I'm going to remove a couple of these HOA ones. And let's say that I wanted to add in the listing agent's information. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do MLS. We'll do insert column again. This time I'm just going to type in agent. And we'll do full name and direct work phone. Hit apply. Excellent. Now, it didn't add it in the order that I was hoping for. So what I'm going to do is, just like we saw with me clicking on here, if I didn't want to actually have this in this order, I can just click and drag. And notice what it does is it actually pulls that column out, and I can move it over into a better position. There we go. And another beneficial one that you guys might want to keep is when you guys add in a column, there is an option here for showing contact. So now we can see whether or not it's supposed to be the realtor remarks, an agent, call the owner, agent, and so on. So now if I wanted to schedule a showing for this particular property, I've already got his name, I've already got his phone number, and I can get in contact with him right away. Now, all of this seems pretty fancy, but maybe let's say that I actually want to print this off. If I go and check all of these and get to my print function, and I just leave it on the regular one, the single line option, click print to PDF, well, there was all those columns that I just added, and it shows those on here for me. But let's say I get out of Matrix and I've gotten back to Matrix later. It's going to not remember all of these things that we see here. It's not going to remember any of the customization. It won't remember that I've added in these extra data that I wanted to see. So if I go back to my Matrix, to doing a search, and this time we'll just do Ardmore and between 100 to 200. There we go. Click on results. It remembered it today. But if I go back in later tomorrow or have to sign back in, it's just going to reset it back to my search defaults. If I want it to remember the things that I've made changes for, there's actually going to be the option to either set that as my default. So for instance, let's add in we'll do acres, and then we'll also add in, let's say the subdivision is really important to the person. Subdivision, there we go. All right, so I've got those added in there. I can save that as a default, which means that now it'll always use that whenever I'm doing a search for residential properties. And that way, if I leave Matrix, if I switch computers, if I sign back in tomorrow, it'll remember all of the different things that I've added on here and keep that going for the future. There's another option though. Let's say that I actually want to save this as a specific name. So I'll do acres and subdivision in this case. I'll do manage display, acres and sub. And there's an option here to save as a copy. Now, save as a copy means that it's going to remember all of the columns as well as the ordering that I had. So for instance, if I switched the acres and then also included the price, and then maybe I also wanted to make sure that the bedrooms were included as well. So we can have all of that on there. And then once I've gotten it arranged, we do save changes. Or if you've made a completely new one and you want to save this as a completely different search, again, save as a copy. Now, there's something else that we are now able to do since we've customized this. If I go back to my print function, so I'm going to grab a couple of properties on here. We go back to print. There is the my prefix in front of a bunch of these. And you'll notice that I have agent or acres and sub up here at the top. I've got another one that's agent single line. Looks like I've got a couple on here that I might need to get rid of, but I do have acres and sub up here at the top. And when I to the PDF, it's going to remember all of those fields, so I won't have to keep on re-adding those. Perfect. Yeah, so we still got our subdivision, we still got our acres. All right. Now, let's switch over to a different option. So instead of displaying with the default, which we might have, which is actually going to be, where did they move it to? That's right, single line down at the very bottom. Oop, there we go. Once we have everything sorted out with our displays that we've added, we can go back to those right here. So it's just this drop down. We've got all of the default ones that I've added in, as well as my acres and subs. And I can get back to it that way. And again, if you don't like the way that it was looking, or let's say you added in columns and removed a couple because you're always searching for the houses, you're always searching for active listings. So having that information on your spreadsheet really isn't beneficial. But now we can rearrange everything. Again, we can save that. We can also switch back over to a different one. And if we need to, we can actually delete those as well. Perfect. All right. Now, one of the other things that we wanted to cover in Matrix is going to be our hot sheets and our market watch. So I'm going to head back to our main page, the My Matrix, and you'll see that we have a bunch of the widgets on the home page. Now, I've made a bunch of my widgets go away. If you guys remember from our regular Matrix class, you can add in a bunch of things from the additional section. We can collapse those. We can even close them out, and they go under the additional. So if there's something that you're not using, or if it's just taking up screen real estate, you can get rid of those. And you can even move these around so that they're positioned in a way that makes sense to you or the way that you would like to have them appear. But let's talk about our hot sheets over here to the left. Now our hot sheets are going to be set up by what time frame they're using. So you notice on the bottom right-hand corner, we do have the option to choose between what the time frame is that we're going to be using for this search. I'm going to do the last week, how about? And up at the top, we have residential, commercial, land, lease, and then a cross-property search. Now, all of these by default are going to be searching for the entire MLS, similar to the way that the Market Watch search functions. But when I click on residential, it's going to find the last 7 days worth of information. And in this case, you notice how it automatically chose Ardmore. What that's indicating to you is that I've customized this to an extent to try and find out maybe what's happening in that specific area. Now, let me show you guys how to do that. So I'm going to head back here. And there's this customize button down at the bottom left. So at the bottom right, we've got our time frame. Bottom left, we've got customize. So customize allows us to go in and we can see the basic sheets that we have. So residential, commercial, land, etc. When we select the sheet that we're wanting to edit, there's an edit button right over here to the right. So when I go into my criteria, I can see, oh, I've actually already got Ardmore put in there. Now, one of the other cool things that you can do, I'll clear that out, is let's say you only wanted to search for very specific kinds of listings. So let's say new listings sounds good, coming soon is great, back on market, sure. Price decrease, price increase, maybe I'm not as interested in. We'll do active, and also expired or released might be excellent, right? So these are the ones that I'm going to be using the most. To select multiple items on this list, I just held down Control, or if you guys are on a Mac, it's Command. If I'm only going to be searching for houses, I can clarify that there. And then again, I can put in whatever area that I'm wanting to search by. Bartlesville, Ada, Broken Bow, whatever you guys are trying to find. Now, when I hit save and I go back to my home page, when I click on residential this time, again, I have it set for 7 days. It's going to show me the last 7 days worth of information that happens to be houses in Broken Bow. And as you guys can see, I got nothing. So what that means is that whenever I hit my hot sheets, there was no refreshes to the Broken Bow area. So no new listings, no coming soons, anything like that. Let's try a different example. I'm going to go back to customize. I got my residential. Again, I click on edit criteria to get back to where I could see all the customization. Let's do one that's going to be a little bit more active. Instead of Broken Bow, we'll do Broken Arrow. Hit save, done. And when I hit residential this time, there we go. Now I've got a whole bunch of results. We've got 66 different things. And at the moment, it's actually sorting it primarily by the change type. So I've got all my new listings first. Cool. And then I've got all of the coming soons that got added, both of them. Back on market, a few of these items that went pending and then have come back onto the market. Then we've got a bunch of price decreases. And then finally on our last page, we should see some expired and released options. So the hot sheets are a great way to kind of keep abreast of an area. Again, that time frame that we set, we just saw the last week worth of information. Maybe I just wanted to see the last 24 hours. Now the 24 hours is on a sliding scale, which means that if I hit 24 hours, it's going to be searching for 10:30 yesterday till 10:30 today. If I just switch this over to today, it's only going to be searching for the changes that have occurred on this calendar day from midnight this morning all the way through till now. So notice we only get 6 results here. If I go back and switch this over again to 24-hour, you'll notice I have a bigger amount of results here because I've got a bunch of properties that were changed just during the rest of the day, usually in the afternoon. All right. Now, we focused a bunch on editing the basic one. I'm going to go back to customize this time. And instead, I'm actually going to focus now on adding one. So instead, I want to create a regular sheet. So I'm going to go back to my criteria. I'm going to just clear all of these off so that I have my residential back to the default. So instead, I'm going to be doing add. Add means that I'm going to be choosing what property type I'm going to be using. So in my case, maybe I wanted to get an overview of an area that I'm working in. So I'll do cross property. And I'm going to do, let's do Ardmore cross property. Since that's a new area, there's a lot of new listings coming in. I'll hit save. Perfect. So now I have to go in, and this time, just like we saw with residential, commercial, the rest of these, there's an edit criteria option. I'm going to choose the one for Ardmore, click edit criteria. And now I can go through and again, just like I saw before, grab all of those, active, expired and released. Excellent. And I wanted to do residential and also do land. So I don't want to see any commercial or lease options. I'm only interested in selling things. And I'm going to leave my property subtype empty because in this case, I'm going to be searching for 2 different property types. The subtype is going to end up just muddying the waters. So I'd put in Ardmore. There we go. And if I wanted to, just like we saw before, there's ways to specify extra data. And there's also the additional fields option. So if we wanted to see, specific information like acres, for instance. Oh, and actually there's already acres on there because we added in we're doing a cross-property search, which includes the acres there. Perfect. So if I wanted to find those, I hit save. And again, now I've got an Ardmore cross-property. When I go back to my home page, I see it on here, and I can set this for the last 3 days. And let's see what we got. Nice. So a bunch of new listings and one that has already expired, which is surprising to say the least. Anyway, so the hot sheets are a great way to just keep interested in a specific spot. If I was going to be using this Ardmore cross property more frequently, just like we saw with our additional fields, we just can click move up to reposition it on the list, and I'll be good to go. And again, if you end up seeing something that you just want to, set back to the normal criteria, you can just do reset criteria. And you can also get rid of any of the ones that you're not using. So like if you just don't use commercial at all, you can hit delete and you'll be good to go. Now, worst case scenario, you ended up deleting some things, didn't end up wanting to use the commercial or the lease, and then somebody gets in contact with you and they're asking you questions about either of those property types that you don't usually deal with. There is the restore system defaults, which actually erases any of the ones that you've created and restores any of the defaults that we saw originally. So those first 5. All right. Now the Market Watch similarly is going to have some customization available. So now that we've seen how that works with the hot sheets, the Market Watch is going to be giving us a bunch of the different data that we just saw as criteria that we could use on our hot sheet. But in this case, it's actually giving us just a live feed of how many things have been added. Now I can change that based on the time frame, just like with the hot sheets. Notice it changes our numbers. I can choose which property type I'm wanting to do. And there's also this customize option, which allows us to choose a specific area. So again, if I wanted to make sure that I was only dealing with, let's say, Carter County, and again, if I only wanted to see properties that had, certain elements to them, like what their price range was, or what their bedrooms and bathrooms were, et cetera, I can build that into my Market Watch. So there we go. I've got this set so that now I'm only going to be seeing Carter County in the last 3 days. I can check the last 7 days and the numbers change, or the last 24 hours and it's going to be a smaller number. So it makes it really handy. Again, this is a good way to just kind of keep abreast of things without having to jump into a hot sheet just to find it. Now, another beneficial thing with this, when we're looking at our Market Watch, if I wanted to find out what it was that was actually added in the last 24 hours, instead of having to click on my hot sheets, and then again, it's going to be showing me a bunch of different property types, a bunch of different, status change types. In this case, I can click on just one of them, and it'll only show me the new listings that have come in. So even easier than the hot sheets, now you can just dive into a specific category. So like what just went pending, what went withdrawn, or what just got released. And if I'm jumping back to the screen, it should automatically refresh. But let's say you left the web page open for too long, you can hit refresh and it'll reset everything back and you can see what you're looking at. And I think the default it goes to is the 7 days. All right. So the last thing that we're going to talk about in Matrix is going to be our speed bar up at the top of the screen. Now you'll notice that as we've traveled through all of Matrix, no matter where we were, whether we were in searches, whether we were trying to adjust our Market Watch settings, our hot sheets, whatever the case may be, no matter where I was, up at the very top is always going to be this menu. And up at the very top underneath the menu is this speed bar. Now the speed bar is really handy. This is one thing that I actually wish more people would use. If you guys are ever doing a search for something and you're fairly certain that you know exactly the criteria, instead of having to start up a search, go into residential search, click active, type in your city, put in your price, put in your bedrooms, and you're having to move your mouse around and click on each of these to try and move them around. Otherwise, you have to do tab and hope that it tabs you to the right spot. If you added in city and now it's in a different field, now it's doing the or and or not. That's not ideal. And again, you're having to move your hand back and forth from the mouse to the keyboard over and over. Instead, you can use the speed bar up here at the top. So I'm going to click on the little question mark icon over to the left of it, and that pulls up a pop-up here. And this shows me how you can use the speed bar. I'm going to pin this over to the side of my screen so we can actually see how this works. There we go. Oh, come on. You're not going to let me do this today. Hey, there we go. All right. So how the speed bar works is that there's a bunch of pre-formatted little shorthand that's going to be built into this. So for instance, if I wanted to do a search and I just arrived in Matrix, I just signed in for the first time today, and I needed to do a search for a specific area. And I wanted to also include maybe a couple other criteria because there was some buyer that was interested in something or other. So I'm going to go up to the top. I know that it's a residential property, so I've got R for residential, com for commercial, land for, or LND for land, and LSE for lease. So in my case, I type in RES for residential. I'll do A. In this case, A is for active. Again, just putting in spaces in between each of these is going to allow me to narrow down my results. So residential, active, we'll do Eufaula now. There we go. And I'll do my price range, 200 to 300,000. So notice I'm leaving off the full digits. So I don't have to put in the zeros at the end to turn this into the thousands. It just automatically assumes that whatever numbers I put in are automatically in the thousands. Now, the next couple numbers that I add, it's going to automatically assume whatever the first number I'm adding is the bedrooms, and the second number I'm adding is the bathrooms. So I'll just do 3+ and space 2+. So now it'll be searching for residential properties that are active in Eufaula between 200 and 300,000, 3+ bedrooms, 2+ bathrooms. Let's say I have a square footage that I wanted to put in as well. So I'll do 2,000+, and then I just have to add on afterwards square feet. Perfect. So I've built all this in. I didn't have to move my mouse around or click on different fields to add all of that criteria in. I hit the search, and here we go. I've got 4 properties in here. If I go back to my criteria, you'll notice that it actually remembers all of the details. So I've got residential, active, in Eufaula, price range, total number of bedrooms and bathrooms, as well as the house square footage. So all of that got pre-built into my search just by typing in up here at the top. Now we can also use this search to find other agents. So for instance, if I wanted to find, let's say, one of our coworkers. So I'll just use them as an example. There we go. So here's Ethan Long. All I did was AG for the agent. And again, that's noted right here, agent search. So AG. And if you do just a last name, so like let's say I wanted to find Michael Yuri, but I wasn't sure if he was in the system as Mike or Michael. So I can just type in Yuri. And when I do my search, here we go. Last name is, perfect. First try. Now, another cool thing that you can do when you guys are looking at agent information is just click on their name and you can find all of their active listings. So if you did get in contact with somebody or somebody reached out to you and they mentioned some listing, you can find them in Matrix. So we just do AG. We'll do Bonnie Baker. Click on their name and you can check their active listings. Oh, doesn't look like she has any. Now there's also the office search. The office search is one of the few things that I would recommend that you guys actually do the little asterisk on. So for instance, if I wanted to search for solid rock, so I'll do office, I'll have to type in solid and then an asterisk because I can't have another space. Remember, that's actually saying that that's more criteria. So I'll do solid, asterisk. There we go. Now I've got all the solid rocks. And the same thing goes if you guys are searching for Keller Williams, Servant's Heart Realty, and so on. All right. Now, we also have more comprehensive searches. So if you guys haven't been exposed to the agent search or the office search, both of those are available as just regular searches. Makes it a little bit easier too, because then you can just see the fields that you can search by. And there's also, just for you guys, since we do mention this in the matrix class, but more just in passing, if you would like to do a tax search, you can do so without actually having to leave to go to Realist in matrix. Notice we've got our owner first and last name, neighborhood, school district, the tax ID if you have the parcel number already. You can even narrow down by county, add in a bunch of addresses all at once, just like we saw at the beginning of class. And we can only add 5. And then we get to the map, and the map works the same way that it does in Realist, where you can just zoom into a specific area. Oh, wait, this isn't far from the property we were just looking at earlier. That's funny. And then you can just click on the tax for any of the parcels, just the same way that you guys would do if you were doing this in Realist. There we go. All right, so the last little bit of class we are going to be spending talking about Realist. So let's dive in. When it comes to Realist, we do have a couple different things that you guys can do that maybe don't get a lot of action, unfortunately. So I'm going to go to the My Search. There is no advanced features whatsoever to the Quick Search. So everything that we're going to be discussing is going to be under the My Search section. So let's make this full screen, get a little bit more area for us to look with. And let's talk about our little qualifiers, the conditions with each of these property searches. So on our house, the criteria actually allows us to do not just the house number, but let's say that we had an area of town, like let's say I wanted to find all the different properties that are here on 11th Street. So I know that it starts with, let's see, 702, and it goes all the way up to 714. So I didn't remember which property it was, but it was on this street. I know the owner's name, but they gave me their address and I didn't write it down. That's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in house number is going to be is between, and we can do a range. So I can do 700 to 730. There we go. And the house or the street name is going to be 11th, and we'll do Avenue. Perfect. Then I do need to clarify my city so that I find the right spot. Ardmore. Oops, if I can type correctly. Excellent. Now, as you can see, as I've already put in this information, so just now when I started typing in any of the criteria, it already is showing me my view results matches. So just like we had in Matrix, where it used to just show us in real time what the amount of matches were, Realist has now started to do the exact same thing. So when I click on search, it'll put all of those dots on the map for me. Oh, and it looks like we've even got some down here, which is going to be the southeast. So that brings us to another thing that we'll have to do. So if I wanted to limit my search just to this area up top, you guys have probably already gotten an opportunity to work with the search shape tools. So I'm going to just drag around that area just to make sure. And you'll notice what it did is it actually added the map tools applied up here. And I can do search. And this time, instead of those 14 results where there was 4 that were the southeast, now it's only finding the stuff that's up on the northwest one. Now, that's all well and good, but the problem is that I've only done a temporary solution to this. Whenever I added in my search map, or the map tool, it ended up restricting it just to that area, but what I wanted to do was actually restrict it to just this street. I don't want to have to actually add to my map. Now, if you guys haven't messed with this already, there is actually a customized search function up here at the top. So when you first get into Realist, it should default you over to this general query. This is the one that includes owner, house, street, suffix, et cetera, all the way down to township range and section. So for those of you guys who are using searches for vacant land. But instead, let's actually go down here. We've got the foreclosure query. No, this doesn't look like it includes the information I need. This is just for foreclosures. Well, it looks like I'm going to have to actually create my own. Now, there is an option to actually create your own search. If you do create new search, that means that it has 0 fields on there. Notice on the right-hand side, there's no selected attributes. But just like I mentioned when we were in our regular Realist class, what I always recommend people to do is click on General Query, go to Customize Search, and notice it is padlocked, so I can't make any changes to this. There's no way for me to rearrange the selected attributes. I can't uncheck any of the checkboxes over here. But wait, I can check checkboxes here. So let's say that I actually wanted to add in some geographic characteristics. Like in this case, we actually need to know the pre-directional and also the post-directional. There we go. As soon as I checked checkboxes, notice what happened. It's no longer locked on the general query, and all of my selected attributes are now free for me to move around. So now I've got the ability to make some changes. I'm going to get rid of these township range and section, and I'm going to add the pre-directional before street name, post-directional after street name, and I think I should be set. Now, if I wanted to save this as something that I'm going to be using for future use, like let's say that this is actually how I want it to appear. Except I needed my tax ID on there. Always got to have my tax ID. I'm going to put that at the very top. There we go. I can actually save this with a specific name. So I just type in a search name, and when I click save, that's actually going to appear now in my drop-down that I'm going to have right here. But in my case, I've already got a default that I've built. Save. I need to put in a name. There we go. I'm going to switch over to my default that I have. And you'll notice I've already got it constructed that exact same way for my default. And when I hit apply, now I've got my tax ID, owner name, house, pre-direction, post-direction is all built in there now. And it also got rid of the township range and section. All right, so now let's try my search one more time. I'm going to do is between. We'll do 700 to 730. Street name is 11th. And post direction is northwest. See if that gets rid of the 4. Hey, there we go. I don't even have to put in avenue. It already got rid of the 4 that I didn't want to see. So when I do my search this time, yeah, this is what I wanted to see. These are the results I wanted. All right. Now, some of you guys may already be familiar with some of the extra details that you guys can overlay. We do have the flood zone information. We've also got school district information. So if I wanted to see if any of these were in a flood zone, I just add the flood zone on the map. I can see that, wow, these are pretty well clear of any flood zones whatsoever. Yeah, perfectly safe. Very unlikely to flood. Now, I'm going to clear my search, and I'm going to clear all the criteria that we have on our screen as well. Let's talk about a couple of the other things. So if you guys are working in Tulsa County, add that on here. There we go. I'm going to zoom on in here. And let's take a look at my favorite example of a flood zone. Right? Oh, yeah, up here. All right. So one of my old bosses lives here, and they had us over to visit one time, and they mentioned that their flood zone was right in front of their house. And if we zoom in here, I can click on the flood zone option and do flood zone. And as you can see, the line for it used to go in front of the house, but now the 500-year floodplain has actually been moved back some. Now, apparently the reason why that was, there's a fun story behind it. Let me see if I can annotate on my screen. So previously, the 500-year floodplain actually ended right in front of their house and then went down here to the there's a playhouse here. But what happened is that last year we ended up having 2 very significant floods that were, supposedly one in every 500 years. And lo and behold, where did the flood actually stop in front of their house? Well, the exact same place that it was that they had originally drawn those lines. So the flood actually stopped, kind of went around the street here like this, and then stopped right in front of their house. And they had some pictures where they drew in on the line where it was that the flood zone used to be. And of course, then they moved it back because clearly you can't have two once every 500-year floods in 1 year. So they moved it back just a little bit. That's going to be a little bit more significant then. Now, also for Tulsa County, it's worth mentioning that we are going to be adding in another option for the flood zones. Pretty soon here, whenever you go to the boundaries dropdown, there will be another flood zone option for Tulsa County specifically that's going to be measured a little bit differently than the way that FEMA does, so that you can actually get both of those added onto your map. And that way you can determine which one is going to be more relevant depending on what your lender is working with, so that they can figure out whether they're going to need flood insurance or not. All right. The next thing we need to talk about is going to be editing our grid. So in this case, I'm going to do a search here. We'll just do a search for Marcus. Why not? No. Let's try. Smith is going to come up with a lot, so we'll just do that. Whatever. Oh, 25. That's actually not that bad. Okay. All right, so we've got Smith added. I'm going to remove my flood zone, and we'll zoom back out again. There we go. So let's run our search. And when I've done my search, I've got all of the Smiths in Tulsa County. And I see down here at the bottom, it's filled up my list with all of those and filled up my map with all of the dots. Let's switch over to our list view. Whenever I click on list, you notice it defaulted me over to this card view. Just to cover this really quickly, because I don't like the card view. I don't think it has enough information. And as you guys can see, unless there's been a listing on a property, it's not actually going to show you the photo of the property either. So instead, I'm going to do customize cards. You guys can see that there's literally only 3 options available. So if you guys wanted to choose a different option, that's it. You can't make any changes beyond that. It's very limited. But in my case, instead of doing customized cards, I'm going to switch back over to the actual list view, the table view. And there's this customized table option, which allows me to show or hide columns. And just like we saw when we were looking at our search criteria, we can add in a whole bunch of different features and functions on here so that when we're looking at that grid, it'll contain the information that I'm actually interested in. We can only add up to 30 different pieces of information, and we can rearrange those at will as well. So for instance, if you maybe see that there's some fields that actually don't need to be on there, so like township range and section, you'll deal with when you get to it. Total assessed value might not be of any interest to you. So now all of a sudden I've got 10 extra spaces. So I can add in maybe some extra things that I needed to, like if I'm doing a multi-county search, I can change the county, put that in there. Lot acres is already in there. Maybe I want to do land use as well. And I'll put that a little bit further up in here just to ensure that it's actually included. Hit apply. There we go. And now I can see land use has been put on. See all of the single family residences and condominiums. Now, similarly to the way that we just customized our grid here, the table, the list, we do have the option to do an export. So what I would like to do is just give you guys a quick overview of how the exports work. There's an export function down here at the bottom. If I do quick export, what it's going to do is it's going to grab all of the different things that we already have. So whatever you had on your table. So remember, we just saw this on here where it was allowing us to customize that to an extent. Whatever fields that you've changed, you can use on your quick export. So this works the exact same way that we saw in Matrix, where we customized our search results page. And then when we went to the print function, it allowed us to print only just those fields so that we could actually customize effectively a printed report. This quick export's allowing us to do the same thing. It just grabs whatever this table contains. And then when we do export, it saves it as an Excel file. And I can just immediately start working with the data as the raw form of data. There we go. So I really like that, but there is also the customize function, which allows us to take a specific set of criteria, just the same way that we saw when we were looking at our table, just the same way we saw when we were looking at our criteria in Matrix. But this time what we can do is we can add way more. So that quick export function, again, it's only going to be grabbing the results as they appeared on the table. If we do a customize export, what we can do is actually go through and add in several different fields on here, up to 157. And then when we do that export, it's actually going to give us the complete perspective of these properties. So any part and piece that you actually were interested in, rather than being limited to just what your table showed. So I really like those functions. I think they're really handy. Now, a few of these things already have uh, guides that we've built. So if you guys are ever interested in learning more about any of these systems, there's a button down here at the left. So when you guys first get into the MLS technology, sign into the MLS portal, which is where we're at right now, click on support, and there's a huge catalog of all the different all the different guides that we have. And you can do a search. So like if you wanted to learn how to do mailing labels, for instance, we'll do mailing labels, create mailing labels in Realist. Excellent. And it's got a little guide there. And there's also even a link to a video. So if you guys are interested in actually learning how to do this and maybe need a little bit more of a visual guide, I usually do, you can go to that. All right. Well, that is the end of our class today. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us.